What caused over 150 injuries in Tel Aviv last week? Hint, it has nothing to do with Israel. Is there a connection between Madison Square Garden and the ancient Temple of Jerusalem? And what's the one thing that'll ruin a day at Disney, besides the rain? We're talking all that and more on today's episode, so let's unpack. Let's set the scene. It's a sunny summer day in Orlando, Florida. Disney goers are enjoying all of the park's famous attractions like Space Mountain, the Main Street Parade, and of course, neo-Nazis? That's right. Last Saturday, over a dozen people representing anti-Semitic hate groups like the Goyim Defense League, Order of the Black Sun, and Aryan Freedom Network stood outside the entrance of Disney World with Nazi flags spouting hate speech. This lasted for a few hours until the group disbanded. While the chief of police and other city officials condemned the act, no arrests were made. After leaving the park, a larger group formed in the Orlando area to continue their quest to destroy the Jewish people. According to the ADL, there was no lack of the anti-Semitic classics like yelling, "The Jews will not replace us," and the tried and true Hitler salute. Sadly, this is not a new phenomenon. The Goyim Defense League made headlines last year when they traveled around Los Angeles yelling, "White power!" and "Kanye was right about the Jews." And those were some of the tamer things we can actually repeat without getting our channel demonetized. While these groups have been very vocal and careful not to break the law, Jewish communities and concerned citizens feel that there is no place for Nazi ideology in the United States of America. This, of course, raises bigger questions about the right to free speech in America and abroad. Americans believe the right of free speech is unalienable, but not every Western country has the same viewpoint. In Australia, they don't have explicit freedom of speech in any constitutional or statutory declaration of rights, with the exception of political speech, which is protected. Does calling out Jews violate free speech? Should there be stricter lines drawn around the American right to protest? Or are we giving these Jew haters, that's what they are, more publicity and more recognition by covering the story? It's really interesting. When you shine a light on something, one of two things could happen. Either you can disinfect it, or you could amplify it. So when talking about these people, these Jew haters, what are we doing? Are we disinfecting them by talking about them? Or are we amplifying? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Oof, that was heavy. Next up, let's report on something a little lighter. This week, Ishay Ribo made history as the first Israeli to sell out Madison Square Garden. The packed arena, which holds seating for nearly 20,000 guests, came to life with the powerful melodies and biblical messaging, giving attendees a spiritual boost just in time for the Jewish New Year. While that's newsworthy enough on its own, one fan, a prominent rabbi, Ethan Tucker, has drawn a fascinating parallel between the sold-out show and the ancient temple in Jerusalem. He writes, the main courtyard in the ancient temple of Jerusalem was just over 40,000 square feet. That means somewhere between 10 to 15,000 people. The sold-out crowd at Ishay Ribo's concert would be similar to a crowd the rough size of what an ancient pilgrim would have experienced in the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. While the temple no longer exists, this mass uniting of Jews is a reminder of what the Jewish people once had. And those moments are really important. They could connect everyone to something much bigger than just the Jewish people. The Ishay Ribo concert is truly a testament to what the Jewish people can accomplish when they come together as a people. And finally, civil unrest is reaching a boiling point as summer ends and the new year begins. Over 150 injuries were reported in a protest last week in South Tel Aviv. The scene resembled an urban battlefield, according to eyewitness reports. On Saturday, hundreds of men armed with sticks, rocks, bottles, and other improvised weapons descended on a hall in South Tel Aviv, where the Eritrean embassy was hosting an event marking Revolution Day, which commemorates the start of the Eritrean War of Independence against Ethiopia in 1961. At least 160 people and 50 police officers were injured in the clashes between supporters and opponents of the Eritrean government. Opponents of the regime tried to prevent the event from taking place over concerns that the event could become unruly, as was the case in similar events in other countries like Norway and Sweden. The protesters were of the Eritrean migrant community, and things took a turn when the pro-Eritrean authority members clashed with those who reject Eritrea's president, Isaias Afwerki. The 77-year-old leader has been in power since 1993 after the country won independence from Ethiopia following a long guerrilla war. Under his reign, there have been no elections and no free media. Exit visas are required for Eritreans to leave the country. It was several years after Afwerki took over the country that Eritreans started leaving and entering Israel through the Egyptian border. This migration started in the early 2000s and continued into the early 2010s. Because their entry into Israel was illegal, their status in Israel has always been questionable. Additionally, because a rise in crime also emerged in South Tel Aviv after more migrants showed up there, it made those who opposed the migration even more upset, as the crime is often attributed to the migrants. Supporters and opponents of Eritrea's government faced off with construction lumber, pieces of metal and rocks, smashing shop windows and police cars. The situation got so tense that police officers shot tear gas and even live rounds to try and calm the crowds. With protests and domestic issues riddling the streets of Israel, this turmoil, which has no bearing on Israeli policy, seems to have pushed Prime Minister Netanyahu over the edge and is part of the reason why he is calling for the deportation of all African migrants. If successful, that could mean the deportation of over 24,000 migrants, primarily from Eritrea and Sudan. The Associated Press noted that this call for deportation is also reigniting the ongoing debate about Netanyahu's recent push to rein in the power of the Supreme Court. Supporters of Netanyahu cite the migrant issue as a reason why the courts should be reined in, saying they have stood in the way of pushing the migrants out. But those who oppose the decision believe that only the people responsible for the violence should be punished. Okay, time for a vocab lesson. A refugee is someone forced to flee their country because of persecution, war, or violence. An asylum seeker is someone who's asked for protection as a refugee but hasn't gotten a final decision yet. And an economic migrant is a person who travels from one place or country to another in order to find better work or living conditions. To add to the complexity of the issue, under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Israel cannot forcibly send migrants back to a country where their life or liberty may be at risk. While this law could end the debate there, Israel recognizes very few of its migrant population as asylum seekers. Many Eritreans see themselves as refugees and therefore believe they should not be able to be deported. But the Israeli government accepts most of its African migrants as people seeking economic growth, rather than escaping inhumane, life-threatening conditions. This distinction makes it easier for Israel to deport its migrants if they don't conform to Israeli society. However, it's important to distinguish between the two groups of migrants to help decide what should be done with them. It would be unfair to group those who reject the current Eritrean regime with the group who support the Eritrean regime. The first group embrace Israeli culture and accept Israeli law, whereas the second group are here to build a better life but still identify as being part of Eritrea's oppressive regime and reject Israeli law and policy. By distinguishing between the two, Israel recognizes that much of its Eritrean population is there to positively contribute to Israeli society and not disrupt law and order. There's a very interesting historical parallel. In 77 to 79, Israel opened its borders to a small number of Vietnamese refugees who were also seeking asylum from its new communist government. While there are differences between both events, of course, they both are stories of Israel showing compassion to those who need a place to call home when their own home turns against them. So what do we do about it? Many believe that if a large enough group is causing turmoil in Israel over an issue that has no bearing over actual Israeli law, policy, or culture, then Israel no longer holds any legal or moral responsibility for their well-being. Also, because Israel has not yet granted the migrants refugee status, as soon as they are in violation of Israeli law, their status as Israeli comes into question. According to Netanyahu, they have no claim to refugee status. They support this regime. He continued by saying his plan is to deport 1,000 supporters of the Eritrean government who were involved in Saturday's violence. This story brings up deeper questions about Israel's role in the world. One question is, should Israel take any refugees at all? Israel was built from Jewish refugees who were escaping pogroms, oppression, persecution from their host countries, whether in Europe, North Africa, or the Middle East. Shouldn't the descendants of these refugees extend empathy to people who fled the hardships of their host country? And looking beyond Israel as a state, what should Jews do to help those who are not part of the Jewish community? What responsibility does it have to others in need? Jewish culture places a high value on human life. Israel has been first responders in crisis zones of places that have condemned its existence. This just happened, like I said, in Turkey after a devastating earthquake and many other places as well. But I've got a big question. Is that value of caring too much causing there to be too little attention paid to its own citizens who are there because they have no other home? On one side of the coin, there's the belief that Israel's fundamental identity as a Jewish state is to uphold Jewish ideals and protect Jewish people. On the other side, Jews claim that Jewish ideals are exactly the reason why migrants like those who have fled places like Eritrea should be protected by those who understand the need for protection, the Jews. While there are no clear-cut answers, there are important things to establish. Number one, violent protesting and rioting is not okay. Number two, this incident is not connected to the story involving the death of Rafael Adana, an Ethiopian 4-year-old boy who was killed by hit and run, and we covered that last week. And number three, this protest also has nothing to do with Israeli government policy. So what can we expect moving forward? As of now, it would seem that Netanyahu will use his power to deport those who support the Eritrean government on the grounds that they have broken the law and would prefer living in their original homeland. As for whether or not migrants from Africa or otherwise will be allowed into Israel, it appears that Israel's identity as a protector of people is not being dismantled just yet. While it's important for the Israeli government to ensure its own citizens have the resources they need, like any good Jewish home, there's always room for one or two more at the table. And as long as those guests want to participate, they will likely be welcomed into the Jewish state. So what do you think? Is Netanyahu overcorrecting? Are the complaints about the migrant community causing crime a warranted reason for new legislation? Should Israel be caught in the middle of an issue that doesn't concern Israel? Where does the line of being compassionate collide with being self-sabotaging? Let us know in the comments below.